Hello, welcome back to the kitchen. This week we're going to be making some granola. So let's meet our ingredients. Alright, this recipe comes from the food blog Cookie and Kate, and it's called their healthy granola. So I'll put a link to that down below, and let's get started. First I'm going to preheat the oven to 350 degrees. And it's now preheating. When it gets to 350, it will say 350 right there, and there will be a beep. Also, I'm going to get my baking sheets ready. Here are the cooling racks that we can put our hot pans on after they come out of the oven. Right now, I'm going to line each pan with some parchment paper. If you're not familiar with parchment paper, you can find it in the same aisle as the tin foil, plastic wrap, etc. And it's especially for baking, and it's good for helping your baked goods get baked more evenly. Also, it looks a little bit similar to wax paper, but it is not wax paper. I have a friend once who got confused and accidentally used wax paper instead of parchment paper, and of course the wax started to melt in the oven and totally destroyed what she was trying to bake. Now the recipe does say just one large baking sheet lined with parchment paper, but I'm just getting two ready just in case it doesn't all fit on one. Okay, first we're going to combine all our dry ingredients, so the oats, the nuts and seeds, and the sea salt and cinnamon. So we're going to start with 4 cups of oats, and this recipe does specifically call for the old-fashioned rolled oats, which I will show you what they look like, and you can see the picture right there. Okay, so here's what they look like, and when it says old-fashioned rolled oats, it just means that they're not as broken down as they would be if you bought the quick oats, or sometimes they're called the instant oats. Those are more broken down so that they will be able to cook so quickly. So it's convenient, but it's not quite as healthy because this is the whole grain in a more whole form, so to speak. So it's actually healthier that way because you're getting a more complex whole grain rather than a grain that's already partly broken down ahead of time. All right, so that's 2 cups. Oopsies. Okay, now you might notice I'm not measuring that exactly. And that's because if you're doing baking like a cake, cupcakes, that kind of baking, you want to be really exact because getting your final product to come out right, it depends on having the right proportion of ingredients so you get the right chemical reaction. But this kind of baking, whoops, a little bit of cardboard got in there. Okay, we don't need that much fiber. This kind of baking is actually more similar to cooking, so you can kind of play around with the ingredients as long as you get the basic proportions right, and as long as you're happy with the flavor. You can be more flexible than you can with like baking a cake or cupcakes or something like that, because it's basically just a combination of tasty ingredients that are baked a little bit to make them get crispy. It's not necessarily depending on this specific chemical reaction like what you do for getting a cake to rise, for example. Okay, so we have our oats. Now we're gonna get 1.5 cups of raw nuts and or seeds, and the blog that this recipe comes from recommended specifically pecans and pepitas. And pepitas are a special kind of pumpkin seed. You might notice that these don't actually, like if you buy a pumpkin on Halloween and you dig out the seeds and you bake them, that is actually really fun to do and it tastes good, but they don't look or taste like this. So this is from a specific type of plant in the squash family that I'm not familiar with, but that's why they look different from the seeds that you're gonna pull out of your Halloween pumpkin. And in addition to that, I'm also going to add some almonds. These are slivered almonds. So we're going to make up that 1.5 cups with a combination of those 3 things. right, that's about a half cup. Okay, now she also says that coconut is an optional mix-in, and she does specifically say that you should add the dried fruit at the end after you've baked all the other ingredients, but I don't see anything particular about whether we should add this before or after. So I'm gonna say we're adding it before because I'd like this to get kind of crispy along with the oats and the nuts. Oh, and I didn't bother to measure, but I guess that's about a half cup. Maybe a little less. Okay, then we need 1 teaspoon of fine grained sea salt. And if you're using regular table salt, the directions do say take it back to a 3/4 teaspoon. I'm assuming that's because regular table salt might taste saltier than this does, so you don't need as much. Because this is in a little grinder, it's hard to really measure it into a teaspoon. So I'm just gonna keep in mind that this is the size of a teaspoon, and I'm gonna grind this into my bowl until I think I have enough. Another method that I've done sometimes is grind it into a bigger container like this, and then pour it into my teaspoon. But I'm just going to wing it today. All right, and our last dry ingredient is the cinnamon, which they call for a half teaspoon. But my rule is more cinnamon is always good. So I'm gonna actually do a whole teaspoon. Oh, that's a lot. Get back in there. All right, I'm gonna do a whole teaspoon, maybe a little bit more. It's kind of a heaping teaspoon right now. All right, so here's what it looks like right now. We're gonna stir to blend it all together. I'm trying to show you without dumping it on the counter. All right, so it's all mixed. Now we're gonna add our wet ingredients, which includes our oil, maple syrup, and vanilla. And instead of the maple syrup, if you want, you can do honey instead. All right, so we're gonna do a half cup of olive oil. Oh, and you can also use melted coconut oil instead of the olive oil if you want to. So I'm just eyeballing this. This is 1 cup, but I'm gonna fill it halfway full. I think that's about halfway. And the same amount of maple syrup or honey. Isn't it pretty? It smells so good too. I used to like that fake syrup, like the fake maple syrup when I was little, but now I only like the real maple syrup from the tree. That's the good stuff. Okay, and now we need 1 teaspoon of vanilla. There you are. Now, speaking of the good stuff, so if you're gonna buy vanilla, you can buy the stuff that says imitation or vanilla flavored, but I think it's so much better if you buy the one that says pure vanilla extract. And all that is a vanilla bean. They take a vanilla bean and they soak it in a mix of water and alcohol until the water alcohol mix gets infused with the vanilla flavor from the vanilla bean, which is from the vanilla plant, and then they sift out the vanilla bean pieces and you just get the extract that's flavored. Now don't worry, because I just mentioned alcohol, don't worry about that. The alcohol is not going to be like making people drunk or anything like that, because when you bake with it, the alcohol burns off and you're just left with the flavor. Oh, exactly a teaspoon. That means I need to buy more. All right, and I like their instructions here. It says, mix well until every oat and nut is lightly coated. Every oat and nut. Okay, we better mix well. Okay, what do you... Oh, that means our oven's ready. Okay, what do you think? Did I do a good job of coating every oat and nut? I hope so. All right, now we're gonna pour this onto our pans and use this spoon to spread it into an even layer. So first I'm just going to try and divide it into 2 equal mountains of granola, and then I'll spread it out. Yeah, I'm glad I got 2 sheets because I think this would have been a challenge to make this all fit. in an even layer on just one sheet. But it's possible that the person who came up with the recipe was using a bigger size baking sheet than what we have here. And also you might notice my parchment paper sheets don't cover the baking sheet quite all the way. Back on there. Okay. Or it's possible that I really was supposed to try and squeeze them all onto one sheet, and maybe my layers are now too thin. So maybe I was supposed to have this be in a thicker layer. I don't know. We're just gonna see what happens. Alright, so now we're supposed to bake this for 21 to 24 minutes in our 350-degree oven, and we're supposed to take it out halfway and stir it. So I'm going to chuck this at about, I'll check it at like 10 minutes, stir it, and then put it back in. Alright, and I hope you can see here that I have my two pans pretty high up in the oven. I have them on the top two rungs instead of on the middle or bottom rungs, because I just find that with baking, a lot of times it's better to have things higher up so you don't risk burning stuff on the bottom. All right, we'll be back in 10 minutes. Okay, I took one of these out of the oven just so I could show you the stirring. So I'm just using this metal spatula and trying to keep it on the paper so I don't have a mess to clean on my pans afterwards. Get back there. Alright, so I'm just shifting it around and getting up under it and flipping it in some cases until I think that I've flipped or moved or rotated all of it. Really all you can do. Okay, I'm going to put this back in the oven, and I'm going to do the same on the second one, and then I'm going to let them bake for about 10 more minutes or maybe a little longer, but I'm going to check them in 10 minutes. But quickly, one more thing. One interesting tip in this recipe is that if you want your granola to be more clumpy, like to stick in clusters or clumps instead of being all just separate oats and nuts, you should press down on it with your spatula at this point in the process. I'm gonna try that because I actually like the crunchy, clumpy kind of granola. And also, while I was waiting for the granola, I decided to wash the dish rack because it was starting to look a little meh. And who wants to put a nice clean dish in a dirty drying rack? So, admire. That's why at home I actually don't use a dish drying rack. I like to use the dish mats that you can just throw into the laundry every once in a while. But anyways, okay, back to dishwashing and waiting for granola to be finished. Alright, so, can you hear that? It's kind of going snap, crackle, pop. Okay, I just took this out of the oven, and I did turn off my oven, or else I'm going to be thinking in the middle of the night, did I turn off the oven? I turned it off, and it says that we need to leave these for 45 minutes undisturbed. So I'm going to hang the do not disturb sign on the kitchen door, and we're going to come back in 45 minutes, and according to our recipe, this will crisp up more as it cools. So that's why we don't want to disturb it, or it won't be as crispy. And also it's going to be way too hot. So we're going to let it crisp up for 45 minutes and I'll be back. Okay, we're back and our granola is now ready. So according to the instructions, we can either stir it if we want it to be more crumbly, or we can just break the clumps apart with your hands if you want it to be more of the like little clusters type granola, which is what I'm going for. Here it is. And I'm going to put it in this container because this container has a lid, which is what we want. So it is kind of crumbly already. So, oh, here's kind of a clump. Right. So I think this turned out really good. It's definitely very tasty. It looks pretty too with all the colors. This would be a great thing to make for a snack, breakfast, having company over, a picnic, just for yourself. And it's easy and you get a lot of bang for your buck. So we will see you back in the kitchen, not in August. We're taking a break in August to get ready for fall programming, but we will be back in September. And actually, Miss Bailey and I are planning a special collaboration on healthy school lunches. Oh, I said the S word, I'm so sorry. I used to hate it when I was a kid and people would all start talking about school when it was only halfway through summer. So we will be planning a special lunch collaboration that has to do with that thing that happens in September that we don't have to talk about right now. And we will see you back in the kitchen in September. Thanks for joining me. Bye!